You think modern cookbooks have all the best holiday recipes? Think again. The most treasured Christmas dishes were never written down. They lived in grandmother's memory and vanished when she was gone. Let's dig into 2 hours of 60 Christmas recipes not found in cookbooks anymore. Cranberry orange relish made with whole oranges was the fresh Christmas condiment that required no cooking and delivered a bright flavor. Whole oranges, including peel, were cut into chunks and ground with fresh cranberries and sugar and hand-crank meat grinders. The mixture was vibrant red orange, intensely tart, and slightly bitter from the orange pith. After chilling overnight, the flavors mellowed while the sugar dissolved, creating something that was simultaneously sweet, sour, and refreshing. The relish cut through rich meats beautifully, providing acid and brightness that balanced heavy holiday meals. In mid-century American homes, this represented modern convenience meeting tradition, something fresh and uncooked when everything else was roasted or baked. Children often helped feed cranberries and oranges into the grinder, watching the colorful mixture emerge. The raw freshness made it distinctive from cooked cranberry sauce, and families often made both, offering choice at the table. Today's reliance on canned sauce misses the vibrant flavor of fresh ground fruit. Popcorn balls were the handmade treasures of Christmas long before wrapping paper and plastic toys ruled the season. Families gathered around the stove, boiling sugar and syrup until it bubbled thick, then pouring it over fresh popped corn. The mixture hissed and popped, and everyone worked fast, buttering their hands to form perfect spheres before the syrup cooled. They were tied with red string or wrapped in wax paper, ready to be tucked into stockings or passed to neighbors. Popcorn balls were joy you could hold, cheap, cheerful, and filled with heart. The sweetness clung to your fingers, and the smell lingered in the air long after the snow outside had settled. They represented a time when Christmas gifts were handmade and happiness came from the smallest things. No store could ever match that kind of satisfaction. Today, they are nearly extinct, remembered only by the few who still make them for old time's sake. But for those who do, every sticky bite is a memory reborn. Caramel biscuit pudding was the warm, mid-century dessert that transformed leftover biscuits into something rich and comforting during winter evenings. Betty Crocker promoted it as a thrifty yet elegant solution for holiday meals using torn biscuits soaked in a caramel syrup made from brown sugar butter and milk. As the pudding baked, the biscuits absorbed the syrup and softened into tender pockets of sweetness, while the top formed a glossy, sticky layer that crackled under the spoon. It filled kitchens with the deep smell of caramel-toasted bread and Christmas spices, making even small homes feel full of warmth. This pudding was a favorite because it stretched ingredients without feeling cheap, turning scraps into a dessert that tasted indulgent. Served with whipped cream or a drizzle of warm syrup, it felt like something special enough for company, yet simple enough for any winter night. Over the years, as baking trends changed, caramel biscuit pudding faded from holiday tables, replaced by quicker store-bought sweets. But for those who remember it, the dish represents resourcefulness, hospitality, and the magic of transforming everyday ingredients into something unforgettable. Crackling cornbread with cane syrup was Christmas side that elevated simple cornbread into something rich and celebratory. The cracklings, crispy bits of rendered pork fat left from lard making, were mixed into cornbread batter before baking, creating pockets of crunchy, porky richness throughout. The bread baked in cast iron until crusty outside and tender inside, its top golden and inviting. Served with dark cane syrup drizzled over warm slices, this combined savory and sweet in ways that defined mountain eating. In rural communities, crackling cornbread meant using every part of the hog, transforming scraps into celebration. The cracklings added protein and flavor that plain cornbread lacked, while cane syrup provided sweetness families couldn't always afford. This was Christmas abundance created from what others might discard, proving mountain cooks knew how to make luxury from nothing. Corn pudding was Southern hospitality baked into a custard, turning humble canned corn into something rich enough for Christmas tables. Cooks combined creamed corn with eggs, milk, butter, and sugar, sometimes adding flour to help it set. The mixture was poured into buttered dishes and cooked slowly until the top turned golden, while the interior remained soft and spoonable. The texture fell somewhere between cornbread and custard, dense yet creamy, with pops of whole kernels throughout. Some families added diced chilies for savory depth, while purists kept it simple. The dish required careful temperature management, as cooking too fast would curdle the eggs. Grandmothers knew exactly when to pull it from the oven, that moment when the center still jiggled slightly but would firm as it cooled. Corn pudding represented transformation of pantry staples into celebration food, proof that special occasions could be honored without expensive ingredients. Today it appears occasionally at Southern tables but has largely faded. Stollen was the German Christmas bread that arrived wrapped in powdered sugar like a gift from old-world bakeries, a rich yeasted loaf filled with dried fruits, nuts, and marzipan. The dough was enriched with butter, eggs, and milk until almost cake-like, then studded with candied citrus peel, raisins, and almonds before being shaped into an oblong loaf meant to represent the swaddled Christ child. A rope of marzipan ran through the center, adding sweetness and almond flavor. After baking, the warm loaf was brushed with melted butter and buried under powdered sugar. Stollen improved with age, flavors melding over weeks as the bread sat wrapped in foil. German immigrant families brought Stollen traditions to America, where the bread became a Christmas morning staple in Midwest communities. Bakeries once sold Stollen by the pound during December. The bread connected families to ancestors across the ocean and centuries of tradition. Squirrel stew bubbled on Christmas stovetops in Appalachian homes where hunting provided what wages couldn't. The small game animals transformed into rich, satisfying meals through patience and skill. Hunters brought home squirrels by the dozen throughout autumn, and the fattest ones were saved for holiday cooking. The animals were cleaned and jointed, then browned in bacon drippings before being covered with water and simmered for hours with potatoes, onions, and wild herbs gathered from nearby woods. The meat became tender and flavorful, its slightly gamey taste mellowed by long cooking and balanced by vegetables. Families gathered around large pots, ladling stew into bowls and using cornbread to soak up the rich gravy. Children grew up considering squirrel stew a holiday treat, never knowing that wealthier families might have looked down on such fare. The dish represented mountain self-reliance, the ability to provide Christmas dinner through skill with a rifle rather than money at the store. Aspic molds were the savory gelatin creations that showcased ingredients suspended in shimmering jewel-toned towers of concentrated flavor. Clarified consommé or tomato juice was combined with gelatin, then poured over carefully arranged vegetables, hard-boiled eggs, or shrimp before chilling until firm. The presentation was everything. Unmolded aspics revealed their contents like treasures in amber, the vegetables and proteins visible through the transparent or translucent gel. Making aspic required understanding gelatin chemistry and having the patience to layer ingredients properly. The texture was unusual, the savory gelatin coating the tongue before releasing its flavors. Families served aspic as a first course or side dish, its impressive appearance justifying the effort. By the 1980s, aspic had become punchline shorthand for outdated cooking. Yet for decades it represented culinary ambition and skill. Aspic has completely disappeared from home cooking, remembered only in vintage cookbooks and mid-century nostalgia. Dandelion greens with fatback appeared on Christmas tables in communities where foraging supplemented what gardens and wages couldn't provide. The bitter greens balanced by smoky pork. Dandelions gathered in late fall or early winter were cleaned and simmered with fatback until tender, their bitterness mellowed by long cooking and rich pork fat that melted into the greens. The greens provided vitamins that stored vegetables had lost over months in the root cellar, and the fatback added calories and deep satisfaction. Some families added vinegar or hot sauce to brighten the flavor. Others let the simple combination of greens and pork speak for itself. Children often resisted the bitter flavor, but adults understood the nutrition the greens provided during winter months when fresh food was scarce. Dandelion greens with fatback represented the knowledge of wild foods that kept families healthy, the ability to find nourishment where others saw only weeds. Marzipan fruits were the Christmas confections that looked almost too beautiful to eat. Miniature apples, pears, oranges, and strawberries molded from almond paste and painted with food coloring until they resembled the real thing in stunning detail. Making them required grinding blanched almonds with sugar into smooth paste, then shaping small pieces by hand into fruit forms that captured each variety's distinctive shape. Fine brushes applied layers of color, building up realistic blushes and shading that made each piece unique. Tiny clove stems and leaf shapes cut from green marzipan completed the illusion. The finished fruits were displayed on silver trays or packed in gift boxes lined with tissue paper, treasured for their beauty as much as their sweet almond taste. Creating marzipan fruits took hours of patient work, the kind of handcraft that showed recipients they were truly valued. European confectionery traditions brought this art to American shores. Pickled peaches were jeweled accompaniments that appeared beside Christmas hams, their spiced sweetness providing perfect counterpoint to rich meats. Canned peach halves were simmered in syrup infused with whole cloves, cinnamon sticks, and apple cider vinegar until they absorbed warm spices completely. The peaches emerged tender and glossy, their golden flesh tinged with amber from the spiced brine. Packed into jars, they could be preserved for months, ready to grace holiday tables whenever needed. Each peach half was studded with whole cloves, making them look almost decorative, edible ornaments for the dinner plate. The flavor was complex, simultaneously sweet, tart, and warmly spiced in ways that elevated simple sliced ham. Grandmothers often made these in late summer when fresh peaches were cheap, though canned versions worked nearly as well. Pickled peaches represented the tradition of putting up preserves, ensuring summer's sweetness could brighten even the darkest winter meals. Persimmon pudding with hard sauce was Christmas dessert that captured wild sweetness of mountain autumn. Persimmons had to be gathered after first frost when they became soft and intensely sweet, their astringency gone. The fruit was pressed through sieves to create smooth pulp mixed with flour, eggs, milk, spices, and molasses. Baked slowly, the pudding emerged dark and dense, its texture somewhere between cake and custard. Hard sauce, butter and sugar beaten until fluffy, flavored with vanilla or whiskey, melted over warm pudding, creating rich contrast. In mountain communities, persimmon pudding represented patience and knowledge, knowing when persimmons were ready, understanding how to preserve their flavor. The pudding was deeply spiced with cinnamon and nutmeg, its persimmon sweetness unlike anything else. This was Christmas dessert that couldn't be rushed or bought, requiring understanding of seasons and willingness to wait for nature's timing. Swedish tea ring was the warm, fragrant holiday breakfast pastry that filled mid-century kitchens on Christmas morning, thanks to its placement in Betty Crocker's festive baking guides. The ring began as a rich yeast dough rolled out and spread with cinnamon sugar butter and chopped nuts before being shaped into a circle and sliced partway through to create its distinctive twisted pattern. As it baked, the layers puffed into golden spirals, each one scented with spice and sweetness, drifting through the house like a holiday invitation. Families gathered around the table to tear off pieces while the ring was still warm, letting the sticky filling cling to their fingers and plates. It was both a breakfast and a celebration, an edible centerpiece meant to welcome the day with comfort and joy. The Swedish tea ring symbolized the idea that holiday mornings deserved something homemade and special even when money or time was limited. Once beloved in households across the country, it slowly disappeared as store-bought pastries replaced the ritual of rising early to bake. But the memory of that warm, ring-shaped pastry remains part of the old Betty Crocker Christmas spirit, where traditions were built from dough sugar and shared moments around the kitchen table. Fig preserves cake was born in the rural South, where fig trees were common and nothing went to waste. Housewives gathered ripe figs at the end of summer, boiled them down into thick preserves, and saved them for special occasions, especially Christmas. The cake was heavy, dark, and sweet, flavored with spice and syrup, and brushed with more preserves after baking for shine. Each slice tasted like the memory of warm sunlight carried into winter. It was more than dessert. It was the story of Southern thrift and generosity, of families who made something grand from what they had. The batter came together slowly, stirred by hand in chipped ceramic bowls, while the scent of molasses and cinnamon filled the room. When the first bite met your tongue, it was soft and earthy, with a sweetness that deepened as it cooled. People brought it to church socials, wrapped in wax paper, as both offering and pride. For many families, this was the closest thing to fruitcake they could afford, and it quickly became a holiday tradition. The figs gave moisture, the spices gave warmth, and the love gave meaning. Today, it is a rare sight, forgotten among simpler sweets. But in its day, fig cake was proof that homegrown ingredients could taste as rich as anything from a bakery. Marzipan fruits shaped by hand were the Christmas candies that demonstrated artistic skill and patience with almond paste. Blanched almonds were ground with sugar and sometimes egg whites until they formed smooth, pliable paste that could be molded like clay. Small portions were tinted with food coloring and shaped into tiny fruits, complete with realistic details like apple stems and strawberry seeds. Each piece was painted and finished to look almost real, creating edible art that filled Christmas candy dishes. The taste was sweet and intensely almond, the texture slightly grainy but smooth. In European traditions, particularly German and Italian, marzipan represented both confectionery skill and Christmas celebration. Grandmothers would spend hours creating these tiny masterpieces, which were too beautiful to eat quickly. Children watched in awe as almonds transformed into fruit orchards in miniature. Today's commercial marzipan often uses shortcuts, but handmade versions once adorned Christmas tables as proof of dedication, artistry, and the magic of transformation. Mincemeat tarts were the tiny treasures of holiday baking, rich with spice and memory. Each one held a spoonful of sweet, boozy fruit filling, apples, raisins, currants, and a splash of brandy, wrapped in a delicate pastry shell. The scent alone could make a house feel festive, filling every room with warmth and nostalgia. Mincemeat came from old British tradition, but American cooks made it their own, often skipping the actual meat and leaning into spice and sweetness instead. These tarts were made in batches, cooled on windowsills and packed into tins as gifts for friends and neighbors. They were a sign of generosity, of effort, of care taken in every fold of the dough. Few people make them now, maybe because they take time or because modern taste leans simpler, but in every bite of those old tarts was a story, a link to Christmases when home felt smaller but love felt bigger. Cranberry upside-down cake was one of those forgotten Christmas desserts that once appeared in early Betty Crocker cookbooks as a bright jewel-toned centerpiece. It began with a layer of cranberry sprinkled with sugar in the bottom of a cake pan, their tartness softening as the heat transformed them into a glossy red topping. Over this, she poured a light vanilla batter that baked into a soft golden layer, absorbing just enough cranberry juice to tint the edges. When the cake was flipped onto a platter, the cranberries glistened like holiday ornaments, creating a dessert that felt both simple and dramatic. Families served it warm with whipped cream, melting slowly down the sides, a contrast of tart berries and sweet cake that captured the spirit of winter gatherings. It carried the charm of recipes made from pantry staples rather than store-bought shortcuts, and it celebrated cranberries in a way modern holiday menus rarely revisit. This cake disappeared quietly as tastes changed, and as gelatin molds and chocolate desserts grew more popular, but older cookbooks still hold the memory of its red shimmer. Grandparents remembered it as a dessert that looked impressive without costing much, perfect for holiday tables when creativity mattered just as much as flavor. Today it remains a nostalgic reminder of the early Betty Crocker era when home bakers trusted their pans, their instincts, and the seasonal ingredients waiting in their cabinets. It was a dish that reflected warmth, care, and a little holiday magic in every slice. Venison backstrap with wild mushroom gravy was Christmas luxury harvested from November hunts and preserved for holiday feast. The backstrap was the tenderest deer cut, saved specifically for Christmas when families wanted something special. Hunters took their best bucks in late fall, field-dressed properly, and hung meat in cold sheds where December temperatures kept it fresh. The backstrap was sliced thick, seasoned with salt and pepper, then seared quickly in hot cast iron to keep inside pink and tender. Wild mushrooms gathered in fall and dried were reconstituted and cooked into rich gravy using pan drippings, creating earthy depth complementing venison. In mountain communities, venison Christmas meant rifle skill, understanding deer movement, and respect for animals giving lives to feed families. This wasn't bought meat, but earned through cold mornings in tree stands. The backstrap melted on tongue, flavor clean and sweet. Families served it with potatoes and beans. Baked pineapple casserole was the sweet surprise that appeared beside holiday hams, its tropical flavor providing brightness amid heavier winter fare. Canned pineapple chunks were combined with sugar, flour, and sharp cheddar cheese, a combination that sounded strange but tasted magnificent. The mixture was topped with buttery cracker crumbs and baked until bubbling and golden, cheese melting into strings that stretched with each serving. The dish straddled sweet and savory in ways that confused first-time tasters but converted them by second bite. Children loved its candy-like sweetness, while adults appreciated how pineapple's acid cut through rich ham. Some recipes added eggs for custard-like texture, while others kept it chunky. This casserole required minimal preparation but delivered maximum impact, making it a favorite of hostesses managing multiple dishes. Baked pineapple casserole represented the era's willingness to experiment. Proving strange pairings sometimes became beloved traditions. Japanese fruitcake had nothing to do with Japan. The name remains a mystery, but the cake itself was pure Southern Christmas tradition. 3 or 4 spice cake layers alternated with coconut-filled layers, the whole construction held together by a boiled white frosting, studded with fresh coconut and sometimes raisins. The spice layers were dark with cinnamon, allspice, cloves, and nutmeg, while the white layers stayed pale and tender. Between each layer went the filling, a cooked mixture of coconut, sugar, and sometimes crushed pineapple that added moisture and tropical sweetness. The finished cake was massive, often requiring a special stand to display properly at holiday gatherings. Slicing revealed the dramatic contrast between dark and light layers, each bite offering different flavors and textures. Grandmothers guarded their Japanese fruitcake recipes, passing them to daughters who continued the tradition. The cake required an entire day to assemble properly, but lasted through the holiday week. Chicken feet soup simmered on Christmas stoves in communities where every part of the bird found purpose, the gelatinous feet creating broth richer than any made from expensive cuts. Butchers gave away feet for pennies or nothing, considering them waste that customers would reject. But knowing cooks understood that feet contained collagen that melted into silky, bodybuilding broth during hours of slow simmering. The feet were cleaned thoroughly, blanched to remove impurities, then added to pots with vegetables and herbs. The resulting soup was golden and rich, its texture almost creamy from dissolved gelatin. Families served it as a first course before whatever main dish the budget allowed, the soup warming bodies and filling stomachs. Children might have been squeamish about the feet floating in their bowls, but they loved the taste. Chicken feet soup represented the wisdom of waste-nothing cooking, transforming discards into nourishment. Oyster stew was the Christmas Eve tradition that brought coastal flavors to holiday tables across America, even in landlocked states. Fresh oysters were gently poached in their own liquor with butter, cream, and just enough seasoning to enhance their briny sweetness. The stew was served in warmed bowls with oyster crackers floating on top, each spoonful delivering plump oysters in rich, silky broth. Families maintained this tradition from generations past, when oysters were abundant and affordable enough for working-class celebrations. The dish required restraint. Overcooking turned oysters rubbery. Too much seasoning masked their delicate flavor. Some families added celery or a touch of sherry, but purists insisted on simplicity. By the 1980s, oyster prices had risen and the tradition faded. Those who grew up with oyster stew Christmas Eves remember the ritual of shucking, the anticipation, and the briny warmth that meant the holiday had truly begun. Hard sauce made with real butter and brandy was the crowning glory served atop plum puddings and mince pies throughout the holiday season. Butter was creamed until fluffy and white, then beaten with powdered sugar and generous amounts of brandy or rum until it formed a smooth, boozy spread. The sauce was shaped into decorative molds or simply formed into logs, then chilled until firm and sliced at serving time. The flavor was intensely buttery with sweet alcohol bite, melting immediately when placed on hot pudding and soaking into every crevice. In Victorian and early American kitchens, hard sauce represented sophistication and proper Christmas preparation, something made ahead and stored in the icebox for weeks. Families often had special molds, shaped like holly leaves or Christmas symbols for forming the sauce. The ritual of making it was passed from mothers to daughters, with each family adjusting the brandy-to-butter ratio to personal preference. Modern desserts rarely feature this accompaniment, but it once transformed simple puddings into something genuinely luxurious and memorable. People today might find it too rich or too much work, but that was the point. It was meant to be made together, to take time, to stir stories between sips. The foam clung to the rim of the cup, the same way joy clung to the season itself. Ribbon salad mold was the crown jewel of mid-century Christmas buffets, an edible rainbow layered in shimmering tiers of gelatin and cream. Every church potluck and family supper table in the 1950s seemed to have one, its wobbly surface glistening under the soft glow of tinsel-covered lights. Housewives poured each layer with precision, lime, strawberry, pineapple, waiting for one to set before adding the next. The cream cheese middle was the star, cutting the sweetness with a soft tang that made the whole thing sing. It was a dish born of pride and presentation, not convenience. People admired it more than they ate it, marveling at its even stripes and jewel tones. When refrigerators became the heart of the modern kitchen, gelatin molds became a symbol of progress, and ribbon salad mold ruled the holidays. Over time, it vanished, dismissed as a relic of artificial color and outdated taste. Yet, for those who remember, its wobble was more than food. It was a reflection of an age that believed every meal deserved a little glamour. Date nut bread rings were one of the most beloved mid-century holiday hostess staples, shaped in ring molds and served with smooth cream cheese or butter. Betty Crocker encouraged home bakers to use them for Christmas open houses because they were easy to slice, easy to serve, and visually stunning. The bread itself combined chopped dates, nuts, flour, eggs, and sugar into a dense, moist loaf with a rich caramel-like sweetness. Shaping it into a ring made it feel instantly festive, especially when decorated with a small bow or placed on a holiday platter. Guests cut small slices, spread them with cream cheese, and enjoyed them alongside coffee or hot cider. It was the kind of treat that felt homemade and elegant at the same time. Date nut bread rings eventually fell out of favor as molded breads and ring pans disappeared from common kitchens, but they remain a beautiful example of mid-century holiday entertaining. In Betty Crocker's world, they symbolized hospitality, creativity, and warmth. They were meant to fill a table with generosity during the season of sharing. Blackberry jam cake was Christmas dessert, carrying summer's wild harvest into winter celebration. This wasn't ordinary cake, but dense creation, darkened with blackberry jam stirred into batter. The jam came from wild berries picked along fence rows in July, cooked with sugar and preserved. Come Christmas, jam transformed into cake moisture and flavor, tart, sweet, purple. The batter was spiced with cinnamon, cloves, and nutmeg, creating warmth, complementing berry brightness. Baked in cast iron, the cake emerged dark and fragrant, its crumb tight from jam. Some families added caramel icing, others served plain. In mountain communities, blackberry jam cake represented foresight and connection to land, picking berries in summer for Christmas months away. Children remembered helping pick berries, fingers stained purple. Understanding this work would become December dessert. The cake sliced thick, each piece carrying memories of summer foraging. Watergate salad appeared on holiday tables throughout the 1970s, its pale green color and mysterious origins making it a conversation piece at every gathering. Named after the scandal, though no one knew why, this dish combined instant pistachio pudding with crushed pineapple, miniature marshmallows, chopped pecans, and whipped topping folded into fluffy sweetness. Preparation took minutes, making it a favorite of busy hostesses needing impressive results without labor. The pistachio pudding gave it that distinctive mint green hue that looked festive against red tablecloths. Children adored its candy-like sweetness and surprise of crunchy nuts amid the creamy base. The dish straddled the line between salad and dessert, often appearing alongside savory dishes, though it could have ended any meal. Watergate salad represented the era's embrace of convenience products transformed into something special. Today, it survives mainly in church cookbooks and memories of those who grew up spooning seconds onto full plates. Roasted chestnuts were the Christmas snack that filled homes with their distinctive sweet, smoky aroma during the holiday season. Street vendors once sold them from carts in every major city, but families also roasted their own over open fires or in the oven. The preparation required scoring each nut with an X to prevent explosion, then roasting until the shells split and the meat inside turned golden and tender. Peeling hot chestnuts was its own ritual, fingers working quickly to remove shells before the nuts cooled and became stubborn. The flavor was unlike any other nut, starchy and sweet with an almost potato-like texture that melted on the tongue. Families would gather around fireplaces, passing warm chestnuts hand to hand while Christmas carols played. The nuts also appeared in stuffings, soups, and desserts throughout the holiday season. Today, fresh chestnuts are hard to find, and the skill of roasting them has largely been forgotten. Those who remember the taste recall it as Christmas itself. Crackling cornbread emerged from cast-iron skillets at Christmas dinners, where wheat flour was too expensive and leftover pork scraps needed purpose. The cracklings, crispy bits of rendered pork fat and skin, were folded into cornmeal batter, adding richness and texture that transformed simple bread into something special. The batter was poured into a skillet greased with lard and preheated until smoking, creating a crust that shattered when cut. Inside, the cornbread stayed moist and tender, studded with salty, chewy cracklings that delivered bursts of pork flavor in every bite. The bread accompanied whatever else appeared on the table, soaking up gravies and pot liquors that might otherwise go to waste. Making crackling cornbread used every part of the hog, wasting nothing in kitchens where waste was unthinkable. Children fought over the corner pieces with the most crust. Crackling cornbread represented ingenuity, the transformation of scraps into something eagerly anticipated. Scalloped potatoes au gratin were the bubbling, golden casserole that emerged from ovens across America, their creamy layers and crispy cheese topping satisfying even the pickiest guests. Potatoes were sliced thin by hand, no food processors yet, then layered in baking dishes with butter, flour, cream, and sharp cheddar cheese. The casserole baked slowly, the potatoes softening as the sauce thickened and the top turned golden brown. Each serving revealed those beautiful layers, potato slices held together by rich, cheesy sauce. Families made these potatoes for every major holiday, the recipe unchanged for generations. The dish required time and attention, the potatoes needing thin, even slices for proper cooking. Children loved the crispy edges and cheese, while adults appreciated how the richness complemented roast meats. Modern scalloped potatoes often use shortcuts, but nothing matches the version made from scratch with patience and real cream. Boiled Christmas pudding wrapped in cheesecloth was the centerpiece dessert that required 3 hours of steaming and months of aging. Families mixed dried fruits, breadcrumbs, suet, eggs, molasses, and brandy into a dense batter that was packed into pudding basins or wrapped tightly in cloth, then boiled in massive pots on Christmas morning. The smell of spices and fruit filled entire houses as the pudding steamed, transforming into something dark, moist, and incredibly rich. When finally unwrapped and turned out onto plates, the pudding was doused with more brandy and set aflame, arriving at the table wreathed in blue fire. The texture was dense and almost cake-like, studded with fruits that had plumped during cooking and infused with deep spice and alcohol flavors. In British and American households through the mid-20th century, Christmas pudding represented the height of holiday tradition, something prepared with ceremony and served with pride. Hidden coins and charms were often baked inside for luck. Today's instant versions miss the ritual entirely. Gingerbread trifle was the unsung hero of old-fashioned Christmas tables, a layered dessert that married warmth and sweetness in every bite. It began with leftover gingerbread, dense, dark, and fragrant with molasses, crumbled into pieces and stacked with custard or whipped cream. Sometimes cooks added bits of stewed fruit or poured coffee over the layers for richness. The result was humble and heavenly, a dessert born from thrift and creativity. No one wasted cake back then. Everything could be repurposed into something new and comforting. The contrast of soft cake and silky custard made every spoonful taste like a memory of home. The trifle bowl itself was a display of abundance, its layers glowing through the glass like stripes of gold and brown. Modern desserts might be neater or sweeter, but few carry the same heart. Gingerbread trifle was proof that the best holiday recipes were never about perfection. They were about care, family, and the joy of turning leftovers into love. Snowball frosting cake was the fluffy white coconut-covered Christmas dessert that looked like a mound of fresh snow glowing under holiday lights. Betty Crocker promoted this cake throughout the 1950s as the perfect winter showpiece thanks to its cloud-soft frosting and blanket of shredded coconut. The cake layers were baked light and tender, then frosted generously with boiled icing or fluffy white frosting before being coated on all sides. When finished, it resembled a snow-covered hill, making it a magical centerpiece for children and adults alike. Its flavor was simple, sweet, and comforting, and its appearance made it unforgettable at winter gatherings. Grandparents loved serving it because it looked dramatic, without requiring expensive ingredients, and it held its shape well on long holiday tables, warmed by laughter and soft lights. Every slice felt like a small celebration wrapped in white. Possum roasted with sweet potatoes was Christmas dinner that filled mountain families with pride. These weren't desperate meals, but traditional feasts prepared with care. The possums were caught in late fall after feeding on persimmons and acorns, giving meat surprisingly sweet flavor. The cleaning was meticulous, with possums scrubbed thoroughly and parboiled to remove wild taste. Then they were stuffed with sweet potatoes, onions, and herbs before slow roasting in Dutch ovens. The sweet potatoes absorbed rich juices while skin turned crispy golden. In North Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia hollows, Possum Christmas meant honoring traditions stretching back generations. Grandmothers taught daughters proper preparation, passing knowledge connecting families to ancestors. The meat was tender and slightly sweet. Served with cornbread and greens, this was mountain fine dining representing cultural identity stronger than judgment. Congealed cranberry salad was the jewel-toned centerpiece of holiday tables, a shimmering mold that turned canned cranberries into something worthy of celebration. Homemakers dissolved cherry gelatin in boiling water, then folded in whole cranberry sauce with chopped celery, walnuts, and crushed pineapple for texture. The mixture was poured into decorative ring molds, then chilled overnight until firm enough to unmold onto crisp lettuce leaves. The result was stunning. Deep ruby red with visible chunks of fruit and nuts suspended throughout like edible stained glass. Children watched in amazement as the wobbly creation held its shape on serving platters. The tartness of cranberries balanced the sweetness of gelatin, while celery provided unexpected crunch. This dish required planning and patience, qualities that defined holiday cooking before instant everything arrived. Today, it has largely vanished from Christmas spreads, replaced by simpler preparations that lack the artistry of waiting for that perfect gelatin set. Moravian cookies were paper-thin spice cookies that required rolling dough so delicate it nearly disappeared, a Christmas tradition from North Carolina's Moravian communities that spread across the South. The dough was dark with molasses and fragrant with ginger, cinnamon, cloves, and allspice, rolled impossibly thin on floured boards until you could almost see through it. Cookie cutters shaped the dough into stars, trees, animals, and angels before baking transformed them into crisp, lacy rounds that shattered with each bite. The cookies were so thin that a dozen weighed almost nothing, yet their flavor was concentrated and intense. Moravian bakers took pride in achieving maximum thinness. The thinner the cookie, the greater the skill. Families would spend entire December days rolling, cutting, and baking hundreds of cookies for gift tins and holiday platters. The tradition connected American Christmas tables to 18th century German settlers who brought their recipes and customs to the New World. Vinegar pie filled the dessert spot on Christmas tables when eggs were scarce and lemons impossibly expensive, its tangy sweetness fooling children who never suspected the humble ingredient list. The filling required only sugar, flour, butter, water, and a splash of vinegar that provided the tartness usually contributed by citrus. Cooked slowly until thickened, the mixture was poured into pastry shells and baked until set, emerging with a custardy texture that rivaled proper lemon pie. The vinegar's sharpness mellowed during baking, leaving only pleasant tang that balanced the sweetness. Mothers guarded the recipe's secret, knowing children would reject dessert made with vinegar if they knew. The pie cost mere pennies, yet delivered satisfaction equal to fancy bakery creations. Vinegar pie represented Depression-era ingenuity, proof that chemistry and creativity could overcome poverty's limitations. Families served it proudly, creating Christmas memories that had nothing to do with expensive ingredients. Standing rib roast was the king of Christmas meats, its impressive size and rich marbling commanding respect from the moment it emerged from the oven. Butchers prepared these roasts with the bones still attached, creating a natural rack that elevated the meat for even cooking. The exterior was rubbed with garlic, salt, pepper, and fresh herbs, then roasted at high heat to create a deeply browned crust before the temperature dropped for slow cooking. Slicing revealed a gradient from well-done edges to rosy pink centers, allowing guests to choose their preferred doneness. The bones were fought over, gnawed clean at the table, or saved for soup. Yorkshire pudding was the traditional accompaniment, the batter puffing dramatically in the hot beef drippings. This was investment cooking, the roast costing more than a week's grocery budget, but justified by the holiday's importance. Standing rib roast represented prosperity and tradition, connecting American families to English Christmas customs. Oyster stew on Christmas Eve was the elegant tradition that brought families together before midnight church services. Fresh oysters were gently heated in butter and milk until their edges just curled, then seasoned simply with salt, pepper, and sometimes a touch of celery salt or mace. The result was creamy, briny, and luxurious, tasting of the sea with rich dairy undertones. Served in fine china bowls with oyster crackers and sometimes a pat of butter floating on top, this was celebration food that felt special without being heavy. In coastal communities and inland cities alike, oyster stew represented Christmas Eve tradition from the 1920s through the 1960s, something families ate before attending services or after coming home from caroling. The preparation was quick but required attention, and the ingredients were expensive enough to feel indulgent. Children often received their first taste of oysters this way, learning to appreciate their delicate flavor. Today, it has largely disappeared, replaced by heavier meals, but it once defined Christmas Eve elegance. Sugar plum candy was Christmas magic rolled into bite-sized memory. Despite what the poem suggests, sugar plums were not plums at all. They were small, hand-rolled balls of dried fruit, honey, nuts, and spice, each one glimmering under a dusting of sugar. Making them was an act of patience, not luxury. Families in the 1800s crushed figs and dates, stirred in crushed almonds, and worked the mixture by hand until it was sticky and warm. They were shaped, rolled, and left to set overnight, filling homes with the scent of cloves and orange peel. Sugar plums were gifts, offerings, and treasures tucked into paper boxes for neighbors or children. They symbolized sweetness earned through effort, the kind of treat made only once a year when time slowed down enough to do it right. Today, they are a ghost of the Victorian table, replaced by chocolates wrapped in foil or store-bought truffles. But back then, a single sugar plum could make a child feel rich. It was joy you could taste, and love you could hold in your hand. Wild turkey roasted with chestnut dressing was Christmas dinner that required hunting success and forest knowledge. These weren't farm turkeys, but wild birds shot in December woods, their meat darker and more flavorful than domestic fowl. The turkey was stuffed with dressing made from dried cornbread, wild chestnuts gathered in fall, sage, and onions. Roasted slowly, the bird developed crispy skin while staying moist inside, the chestnut dressing absorbing juices and becoming rich and savory. In mountain communities, wild turkey represented Christmas success. The hunter who brought one home provided real celebration. The meat was lean and slightly gamey, requiring careful cooking to stay tender. Chestnuts added sweetness and texture impossible with modern ingredients. This was Christmas earned through December mornings in cold woods, through knowing turkey habits and shooting straight. The finished bird fed extended family, its presence on the table marking genuine achievement. Glorified rice transformed leftover grain into a festive dessert salad that children begged for and adults secretly loved just as much. Cold-cooked rice was folded with crushed pineapple, miniature marshmallows, maraschino cherries, and whipped cream until it became unrecognizable from its humble origins. Some versions added chopped nuts or coconut for texture, while others kept the base simple. The dish needed thorough chilling, allowing flavors to meld and rice to soften in the creamy mixture. Served in crystal bowls, glorified rice looked almost bridal, pale and dotted with bright cherry red. The sweetness made it controversial as a side dish, yet families insisted it belonged alongside turkey and gravy. This was thrift elevated to celebration, using rice that might otherwise go to waste. Mothers passed down specific ratios, each family believing their version superior. Glorified rice represented an era when creativity with basics was celebrated, when making something from nothing was its own form of kitchen magic. Boiled custard was the Christmas drink that arrived in punch bowls and crystal cups, a silky smooth beverage that warmed both hands and hearts during the holiday season. Unlike store-bought eggnog, this custard was cooked slowly on the stovetop, with patient cooks stirring constantly to prevent curdling while eggs, sugar, and whole milk transformed into something velvety. The process required attention. Too much heat and the eggs would scramble, too little and the custard stayed thin. Grandmothers knew exactly when to remove the pot from the heat, that moment when the mixture coated a wooden spoon and held its shape. Vanilla and nutmeg were added at the end, filling kitchens with the scent of the season. The custard was served cold in small cups, sometimes with bourbon for adults. Children waited eagerly for their share, knowing boiled custard meant Christmas had truly arrived. Families made gallons, sharing with neighbors and bringing it to church gatherings where it disappeared within minutes. Mock turkey was the centerpiece of Christmas tables where real birds were impossible luxuries. A loaf of seasoned bread and vegetables shaped and roasted to resemble the turkey families couldn't afford. The preparation began days ahead, stale bread saved and crumbled, mixed with sautéed onions, celery, sage, and whatever drippings could be scraped from previous meals. The mixture was packed into a mound, shaped to suggest a bird's body, sometimes with carved extensions mimicking drumsticks. Basted with butter or bacon grease, the loaf roasted until golden brown, its surface crackling and aromatic. Served on the best platter with gravy pooled around its base, mock turkey allowed families to participate in the ritual of carving at the table. Children who never knew the difference grew up believing this was how Christmas dinner looked. The dish represented dignity despite poverty, the determination to celebrate properly even when circumstances demanded creativity. Roast goose was the traditional Christmas bird before turkey claimed the holiday throne, its rich, dark meat and crispy skin gracing tables for centuries. Families who kept geese would select their Christmas bird months in advance, fattening it until it reached proper size. The preparation began the night before, with the bird hung to dry so the skin would crisp properly during roasting. Goose fat rendered during cooking was saved religiously, liquid gold for roasting potatoes throughout the winter. The meat was darker and richer than turkey, with a flavor that demanded respect and proper accompaniments like red cabbage and applesauce. Carving goose required different skills than turkey, the anatomy being distinct. By the 1980s, goose had largely disappeared from American Christmas tables, replaced by the blander but more forgiving turkey. Those who remember goose Christmases speak of them with reverence, mourning a tradition that connected them to centuries of holiday feasting. Crown roast of pork decorated with paper frills was the showstopper centerpiece that made Christmas dinner feel truly spectacular. Butchers prepared these special roasts by tying pork rib sections into circles, creating natural crowns that stood upright on platters. The center was stuffed with bread dressing mixed with sausage, apples, and herbs, while the roast itself was rubbed with garlic, salt, and pepper before slow roasting until golden brown. Paper frills were placed on each rib bone before serving, creating a festive appearance that drew gasps when the roast arrived at the table. The meat was tender and juicy, the stuffing absorbed porky juices, and the presentation was genuinely impressive. In mid-century American homes, crown roast represented prosperity and celebration, something families ordered specially and served with pride. The carving was ceremonial, each person receiving ribs and stuffing together. Today's simpler roasts cannot match the drama and elegance, though the preparation required skill and confidence that modern cooks often lack. Suet pudding was a relic from another century, dense, steamed, and spiced with memories of hearth and hardship. It came from the days when ovens were rare and every meal was slow-cooked with purpose. Housewives mixed suet, the rendered fat of beef or mutton, with molasses, dried fruit, and flour, then tied it up in cloth and steamed it for hours. The kitchen would fill with the scent of nutmeg and cinnamon, the windows fogged from the heat of boiling pots. When the pudding emerged, it was heavy, fragrant, and rich, more nourishing than fancy. Suet pudding was the Christmas dessert of settlers, sailors, and survivors, each slice a testament to endurance. Served with a warm sauce or a dollop of cream, it felt like a feast in a time when feasts were rare. It has long vanished from American tables, deemed too old-fashioned, too heavy. Yet somewhere between the steam and the spice, it held the essence of a holiday that valued warmth over show. Dutch Appelkuchen was the cozy breakfast treat Betty Crocker pushed during the holiday season, combining soft dough, warm apples, and a sugary crumble topping. It was baked in wide pans so that families could cut generous squares on Christmas morning, filling the house with the smell of cinnamon-rising dough and sweet apples. This dish blended the feel of coffee cake with the tenderness of fruit pastries, making it both comforting and celebratory. It disappeared as store-bought pastries replaced homemade breakfasts, but it remains one of the most nostalgic Betty Crocker holiday bakes. Grandparents served it warm with butter melting into the top, and children gathered close to the table, waiting for their piece as the winter sun came through frosted windows. It made mornings feel special long before gifts were opened. Souse meat with crackers was Christmas appetizer that transformed pork scraps into delicacy through careful preparation. The souse was made from pig heads, feet, and ears boiled until tender, then chopped fine and bound with gelatin from bones. Vinegar, onions, and spices were added before pressing mixture into loaf pans to set. By Christmas, the souse sliced clean, its texture firm and slightly gelatinous, its flavor tangy and rich. Served cold with saltine crackers, this was Christmas snacking that represented complete hog utilization. In mountain communities, souse meant respect for animals and refusal to waste anything. The vinegar preserved meat while adding brightness that cut through richness. Children learned to appreciate souse as grown-up food, its complex flavors marking passage into adult tastes. This was Christmas tradition born from necessity, proving that the finest cooking often came from using everything and wasting nothing. Scalloped oysters were a Christmas tradition in coastal communities where briny bivalves signified celebration and abundance. Layers of shucked oysters nestled between buttery cracker crumbs in shallow baking dishes, each layer doused with oyster liquor, cream, and butter. Seasonings were simple: salt, pepper, and Worcestershire sauce to enhance oceanic flavor. The casserole baked until tops turned golden while oysters beneath plumped and released juices into the cream. The result was rich and delicate, soft oysters against crunchy cracker layers. For families with New England or Southern roots, this dish carried generations of memory, appearing on holiday tables reliably as the tree itself. Children often developed their taste for oysters through this dish, familiar crackers making unusual protein approachable. The smell alone announced Christmas had arrived. Though fresh oysters remain available, scalloped oysters have largely faded, remembered now mainly by elders who associate the dish with their finest holiday memories. Persimmon pudding was the Christmas dessert that depended entirely on finding perfectly ripe wild persimmons, a fruit that rewarded patience but punished impatience with mouth-puckering astringency. Families in the Midwest and South knew to wait until after the first hard frost, when persimmons softened into orange globes of concentrated sweetness. The pulp was pushed through sieves to remove seeds and skin, creating a thick puree that gave the pudding its distinctive flavor, somewhere between dates and honey with hints of cinnamon. The batter was simple: persimmon pulp mixed with flour, sugar, eggs, butter, and spices, then baked until set and deeply caramelized. The texture was dense and sticky, almost like fudge, demanding to be eaten warm with hard sauce or whipped cream. Persimmon pudding appeared only at Christmas because that was when the fruit ripened. Families who knew good persimmon trees guarded them jealously. The dessert connected people to the land and seasons in ways modern cooking rarely does. Neck bones and rice stretched across Christmas tables in homes where ham was a luxury and turkey was a dream. The bony cuts simmered until their meat fell apart into savory shreds. Pork neck bones cost almost nothing because butchers considered them more bone than meat, but families knew better. Hours of simmering extracted every bit of flavor, the bones releasing gelatin that thickened the cooking liquid into rich gravy. The meat, though sparse, was deeply flavored and satisfying when spooned over mounds of rice that absorbed the pork-infused liquid. Some families added onions and garlic, others kept it simple with just salt and pepper. The dish required no special skills, only patience and a heavy pot that could withstand hours on the stove. Children learned to pick around bones, finding every tender morsel hidden in the joints. Neck bones and rice represented survival cooking at its most practical, turning what others discarded into Christmas dinner. Beef Wellington was the ultimate expression of holiday extravagance, wrapping prime beef tenderloin in mushroom duxelles and flaky puff pastry. The preparation took hours, searing the beef, cooking down finely chopped mushrooms until they were practically dry, wrapping everything in pastry and chilling until firm. Timing the bake was crucial. The pastry needed to turn golden while the beef inside stayed perfectly pink. Slicing revealed beautiful cross-sections of meat encased in mushroom and pastry that made guests audibly gasp. This was company food, reserved for Christmas Eve dinners when important guests were coming or when families wanted to prove their sophistication. The dish required expensive ingredients and considerable skill, making it a status symbol as much as a meal. Beef Wellington represented the aspirational cooking of the era, when home cooks attempted restaurant-quality dishes to impress. It has largely vanished from home kitchens, relegated to expensive steakhouses where few experience its former glory. Syllabub whipped with sherry and cream was the Christmas dessert drink that blurred the line between beverage and pudding. Heavy cream was whipped with sweet sherry or Madeira, sugar, lemon juice, and sometimes beaten egg whites until it formed soft, billowy foam. The mixture was spooned into glasses and chilled, settling into layers with frothy top and slightly liquid bottom. The taste was boozy, creamy, and citrus bright, something between eggnog and whipped cream with sophisticated wine undertones. In colonial and Victorian Christmas celebrations, syllabub represented elegance and proper entertaining, something served from punch bowls or special syllabub glasses at holiday gatherings. The preparation was simple, but required quality ingredients and proper technique to achieve the right texture. Children received versions made with milk and minimal alcohol, while adults enjoyed the full-strength creation. Modern desserts rarely combine wine and cream this way, but syllabub once stood as essential Christmas tradition, proving that simple combinations executed well-created genuine luxury and memorable flavor. Potato candy was one of those desserts that sounded like a mistake, but tasted like a miracle. Born in Appalachian kitchens, it began with a single mashed potato, a cheap, filling staple turned unexpectedly sweet. Cooks would mix the potato with powdered sugar until it formed a dough, roll it out flat, and spread a layer of peanut butter across the top before rolling it tight like a jelly log. The result was a swirled candy, soft and rich, that melted in your mouth with the flavor of simplicity itself. It was a Christmas favorite for families with little to spare, proof that even the humblest ingredient could become something special. Children would slice the rolls and sneak bites while they were still soft, unable to wait for them to firm up in the cool air. Potato candy was a sweet born of imagination and survival, a dessert that turned necessity into joy. It may not fit modern ideas of confectionery art, but in those lean years, it was as treasured as any box of chocolates. Tomato aspic ring was a savory gelatin dish that once appeared in nearly every Betty Crocker holiday spread, even though today most people cannot imagine eating tomato juice suspended in a mold. Your grandparents knew it as a classic cold salad presented in bright red rings filled with crisp lettuce, celery, or cucumber in the center. It was elegant by mid-century standards, a way to show skill and modern taste when gelatin molds were considered the height of home entertaining. The mixture combined seasoned tomato liquid, gelatin, Worcestershire, and sometimes chopped vegetables, then chilled until firm enough to slice. The aspic was served alongside turkey ham or roast, making it a refreshing counterbalance to heavy foods. It looked dramatic on a table, especially when unmolded onto a polished platter shaped perfectly smooth and glistening under holiday lights. Time changed the expectations of Christmas menus, and with that change, tomato aspic faded quietly from homes replaced by fresher, lighter dishes. But for families who remember it, the aspic was a sign of tradition, care, and pride in presenting something beautiful even when ingredients were humble. It carried the spirit of a hostess who wanted her table to look as joyful as the season itself. Wassail bowl served hot with floating apples was the Christmas punch that welcomed guests with warmth and spiced tradition. Apple cider was heated with cinnamon sticks, cloves, allspice, and sometimes orange peel, creating an aromatic base. Sugar and sometimes eggs were added for richness, while ale or wine provided boozy depth. Small apples or apple slices floated on top, bobbing like ornaments in the steaming liquid. The taste was sweet, spicy, and warming, with layered flavors that developed as the wassail sat on the stove throughout Christmas parties. In English and American traditions from medieval times through the mid-20th century, wassail represented hospitality and celebration, offered from large bowls with a ladle for serving. The ritual of wassailing included toasting to health and prosperity, making the drink about community as much as flavor. Families kept special bowls just for wassail, ornate pieces that came out once yearly. Modern hot apple cider cannot match the complexity or the ceremonial importance that wassail once carried at Christmas gatherings. Eggnog pie was a silky, golden dream poured into a flaky crust, carrying all the warmth of Christmas in every spoonful. It began as a clever way to stretch leftover eggnog into something new, but soon it became a holiday classic in its own right. The filling was rich with nutmeg, rum extract, and creamy custard, baked until just set and chilled until smooth. It was the kind of dessert that did not shout for attention. It simply waited quietly to be remembered. Families would top it with whipped cream or dust it with spice before serving it after long dinners filled with laughter. Eggnog pie was more than just dessert. It was the final note of harmony at the end of a perfect day. Its soft sweetness lingered, echoing the songs on the radio and the faint glow of tree lights through frosted windows. In a world that moves too fast now, there's something deeply comforting about a pie that asks you to slow down and taste the season. Peppermint chiffon pie was the pale pink cloud of a dessert that once appeared on many Betty Crocker winter menus, offering a light, airy alternative to heavier Christmas sweets. It began with crushed peppermint candy folded into a chiffon mixture of whipped cream, gelatin, and sugar, creating a soft pastel filling poured into a simple crust. As it chilled, it firmed into a delicate slice that melted on the tongue, leaving a gentle mint sweetness. Its color alone made it perfect for holiday tables, reminiscent of candy canes and festive ribbons. Families served it after heavy meals because it felt refreshing instead of overwhelming. Over time, chiffon pies lost popularity, and peppermint desserts shifted toward bark and cookies, leaving this once beloved pie behind. Yet, it remains a symbol of mid-century elegance, and the Betty Crocker approach to creating desserts that looked cheerful and tasted light. It was a dish meant to bring a breath of winter freshness to the end of a warm family meal. Broccoli rice casserole became a 1970s Christmas staple when convenience products merged with home cooking to create something families genuinely craved. Cooks combined cooked rice with chopped broccoli, then folded in cream of mushroom soup and processed cheese spread that melted into golden richness. Some recipes called for sautéed onions and celery, adding layers of flavor beneath the creamy base. The mixture was baked until bubbling around the edges, the top developing golden spots where cheese had caramelized. The texture was comfort itself, creamy rice studded with tender broccoli, every bite coated in savory cheese sauce. Children who refused plain broccoli would eat it gladly when disguised in this casserole, making it a parental victory as much as a side dish. The recipe appeared in community cookbooks across America. Broccoli rice casserole represented an era when processed ingredients were celebrated, when feeding families well meant using every shortcut available. Let's dig into 30 Christmas dinners from those decades that have completely disappeared. Crown roast of pork was the showstopper centerpiece that announced a family's prosperity and a mother's skill the moment guests entered the dining room. Butchers would French the rib bones and curve them into a majestic crown shape, each bone tip adorned with a paper frill that made the roast look almost too elegant to eat. The center was filled with savory stuffing, often bread-based with apples, onions, and sage, that cooked inside the meat, absorbing all those rich pork juices. Families ordered these roasts weeks in advance from local butchers who knew exactly how to prepare them. The presentation was theatrical, carried to the table on the best silver platter while everyone gasped and applauded. Carving required precision, with the host carefully separating each chop while keeping the crown intact as long as possible. The meat was succulent, the stuffing rich, and the experience unforgettable. Crown roast represented an era when Christmas dinner was performance as much as meal, when presentation mattered deeply. Chicken a la king, served in pastry shells, was the elegant Christmas luncheon dish that transformed leftovers into luxury. Diced chicken was combined with mushrooms, pimientos, and sometimes green peppers in a rich cream sauce thickened with egg yolks and sherry. The mixture was heated gently to avoid curdling, creating something velvety and sophisticated. Spooned into baked puff pastry shells or over toast points, it represented refined dining and proper entertaining. In tea rooms and home kitchens during the 1940s through 1960s, chicken a la king appeared at ladies' Christmas luncheons and bridge club gatherings, showing that leftover turkey or chicken could become something genuinely impressive. The preparation required skill with sauce making and attention to temperature, but the result was always creamy, flavorful, and satisfying. Families often made it on December 26th using Christmas turkey, extending the holiday meal into something that felt fresh and special. Modern versions with canned soup cannot match the silky texture and complex flavor of properly made a la king with real cream and careful technique. Three-bean salad appeared at nearly every holiday gathering throughout the 1970s, its colorful layers making it as beautiful as it was economical. Green beans, yellow wax beans, and kidney beans were drained from cans and combined with sliced onions and bell peppers in large glass bowls. A marinade of oil, vinegar, sugar, and spices was poured over everything. Then the salad rested overnight while flavors melded. The result was tangy and crisp, each bean variety offering different texture and color. What made three-bean salad practical was its cost. Canned beans were inexpensive, and the salad stretched to feed crowds without straining budgets. It traveled well, too, making it a potluck favorite that arrived looking good. The dish required no heating and could sit at room temperature through long gatherings. Three-bean salad proved that simple preparations from pantry staples could earn places on festive tables alongside more elaborate offerings. Cranberry conserve was the Christmas condiment that elevated turkey and ham beyond ordinary fare. A chunky preserve combining fresh cranberries with orange, nuts, and sometimes raisins. Unlike simple cranberry sauce from a can, Conserve required cooking whole berries with sugar until they burst, then folding in orange zest, chopped walnuts, and diced apple for texture. The mixture was thick enough to hold its shape yet spreadable for biscuits. Families made conserve in large batches before Christmas, filling mason jars for gifts and storage. The flavor balanced tart cranberries with sweet orange and earthy walnuts, each spoonful offering different textures. Grandmothers served conserve in cut glass dishes, the deep ruby color glowing like jewels on the holiday table. The tradition transformed a simple berry into something worthy of celebration. Though cranberry sauce remains popular, the richer conserve has largely disappeared from modern tables. Glorified rice transformed leftover grain into a festive dessert salad that children begged for and adults secretly loved just as much. Cold-cooked rice was folded with crushed pineapple, miniature marshmallows, maraschino cherries, and whipped cream until it became unrecognizable from its humble origins. Some versions added chopped nuts or coconut for texture, while others kept the base simple. The dish needed thorough chilling, allowing flavors to meld and rice to soften in the creamy mixture. Served in crystal bowls, glorified rice looked almost bridal, pale and dotted with bright cherry red. The sweetness made it controversial as a side dish, yet families insisted it belonged alongside turkey and gravy. This was thrift elevated to celebration, using rice that might otherwise go to waste. Mothers passed down specific ratios, each family believing their version superior. Glorified rice represented an era when creativity with basics was celebrated, when making something from nothing was its own form of kitchen magic. Shrimp cocktail was the luxurious appetizer that opened Christmas dinner with pink crescents arranged around cocktail sauce. Each shrimp a small indulgence. Large shrimp were poached until just pink, chilled thoroughly, then hung over the rims of stemmed glasses filled with spicy red sauce. The presentation was classic, the shrimp curving elegantly, the sauce bright and inviting. Guests would pluck shrimp by their tails, dip them in sauce, and eat them in 1 or 2 bites. The cocktail sauce was homemade, combining ketchup, horseradish, lemon juice, and Worcestershire into something tangy and sharp. Shrimp cocktail represented accessible luxury, expensive enough to feel special but simple enough for home preparation. The dish appeared at dinner parties and holiday gatherings throughout the era. While shrimp cocktail hasn't completely disappeared, the formal presentation, stemmed glasses, individual portions, has given way to casual platters that lack the original's elegance. Lane cake was the southern belle of Christmas desserts, a towering white layer cake filled with bourbon-soaked fruits and nuts that made it legendary at holiday gatherings. The cake layers were tender and white, made with egg whites only, their delicate crumb providing perfect backdrop for the rich filling. The filling combined egg yolks, sugar, butter, raisins, coconut, pecans, and enough bourbon to make flavors sing. Some cooks added maraschino cherries for color. The mixture was cooked until thick, then spread between layers while still warm so it could soak into the cake. Fluffy white frosting covered everything, hiding treasures within until the first slice revealed those layers of golden, boozy filling. Lane cake was not everyday dessert. It was reserved for Christmas, weddings, and occasions worthy of the effort required. Named for its Alabama creator, the cake traveled across the South and became synonymous with gracious holiday hospitality that showed guests they were truly honored. Marinated mushrooms were the tangy appetizer that disappeared first from relish trays, their garlicky brine making them irresistible to adults. Button mushrooms were simmered briefly in olive oil, vinegar, garlic, and herbs until they absorbed the marinade completely. Chilled overnight, they emerged firm yet tender, earthy flavor enhanced by bright acidity. Served cold alongside olives and pickles, marinated mushrooms added sophistication to appetizer spreads. The mushrooms could be jarred and stored for weeks, improving in the flavorful liquid. Some cooks added red pepper flakes for heat, while others kept it simple with garlic and Italian herbs. The dish required minimal cooking but delivered impressive results, perfect for busy schedules. Marinated mushrooms represented growing appreciation for Mediterranean flavors, bringing garlic and olive oil to tables that had previously known only butter. Sorghum gingerbread was Christmas dessert that captured dark sweetness of mountain agriculture. Sorghum syrup, made from cane grown and processed locally, replaced expensive molasses in gingerbread recipes. The result was cake that was moist, dark, and intensely spiced with ginger, cinnamon, and cloves. Baked in cast iron and served warm, it filled houses with Christmas smells that drifted through hollows. In rural communities, sorghum gingerbread meant Christmas sweetness that didn't require store-bought ingredients, since families often made their own sorghum. The cake was dense and rich, its crumb tight from sorghum's weight. Served with butter or whipped cream when available, plain when not, it satisfied sweet cravings during lean times. This represented mountain resourcefulness, creating celebration desserts from crops grown and processed locally, proving Christmas joy came from land and labor rather than stores and money. Orange clove-baked custard was the gently spiced dessert that warmed vintage Christmas tables, offering a soft, soothing sweetness without the heaviness of pies. Milk eggs, sugar orange zest, and cloves baked slowly into a silky custard that set into tender spoonfuls, glowing faintly golden. Served warm or chilled, it was a comforting, simple dessert that balanced richness with lightness. Families appreciated its practicality because it required basic ingredients and carried the holiday scent of citrus and spice. Though overshadowed by flashier desserts, it remains a quiet classic within Betty Crocker's winter recipes. Each spoonful held the gentle warmth of oranges and cloves, the very essence of an old-fashioned holiday night where the glow of the tree and the hush of winter made simple desserts taste extraordinary. Seven-layer dip was the Tex-Mex miracle that made every 1980s party table complete. Built in glass dishes so everyone could admire its colorful stripes, it layered beans, sour cream, guacamole, salsa, cheese, olives, and tomatoes, like edible art. It was food you could see, food that invited curiosity before you even picked up a chip. The first scoop always broke the clean pattern, but that was part of the fun. By the end of the night, it looked like a joyful mess of color and taste. Every ingredient brought its own story: canned, refried beans for thrift, guacamole for trendiness, shredded cheese for comfort. It was multicultural celebration in a casserole dish, bold and unapologetically 1980s. Kids loved it for the color, adults for the spice, and everyone for the ease of it all. It turned any table into a fiesta, even under twinkling Christmas lights. In every creamy scoop was proof that food could be both casual and festive, both homemade and easy. A perfect symbol of its time. Brandied mincemeat tarts served warm were the Christmas dessert that combined tradition with portability and proper spicing. The mincemeat filling was prepared weeks ahead, aging in crocks until Christmas when it was spooned into tiny tart shells. Each tart received just enough filling before being topped with pastry stars or lattice, then baked until golden. Served warm from the oven, they released steam carrying cinnamon, clove, and brandy aromas that announced Christmas throughout the house. The combination of flaky pastry and rich, spiced filling made them irresistible despite their unusual name. In Victorian and early American traditions, mincemeat tarts were essential Christmas fare, something offered to guests who came caroling or visiting. The small size meant everyone could have one without committing to a large slice of pie. Families made dozens, storing them in tins and reheating as needed throughout the season. Today's preference for simpler desserts means these tarts have nearly disappeared, but they once represented Christmas hospitality and the proper way to welcome guests with warmth. Cranberry bread pudding was the thrifty warm dessert families made when leftover bread met cans or jars of cranberry sauce in the days after Christmas. The bread soaked up milk eggs, sugar and spices, transforming into a custard-like base that baked into soft, comforting layers. Cranberry swirls added tart sweetness throughout, making each bite feel festive. Served warm with cream or butter, it was a dessert rooted in resourcefulness and holiday flavor. It captured the Betty Crocker belief that nothing should go to waste and that simple ingredients could bring deep comfort. The pudding filled kitchens with a gentle, spicy aroma that made even quiet winter evenings feel special, and it offered a way to turn scraps into something loved rather than forgotten. Grandparents remembered it as a dessert that made the season last just a little longer. Fried apple pies with sorghum were Christmas dessert that children waited for all year. Dried apples from summer harvest were rehydrated and cooked down with sorghum syrup, cinnamon, and nutmeg until thick and jammy. The filling was enclosed in circles of biscuit dough, crimped shut, and fried in hot lard until golden and crackling. The result was handheld Christmas joy. Crispy outside, molten apple inside, sweet and spiced. In rural communities, fried apple pies meant celebration accessible to poorest families, since dried apples cost nothing but summer work. Children received these as special treats, burning their mouths on hot filling while snow fell outside. The pies were portable, lasting days without refrigeration, making them perfect for holiday visiting. Each bite delivered concentrated apple sweetness balanced by pastry crunch, proving that simplest ingredients could create genuine luxury when prepared with care and love passed through generations. Creamed spinach was the elegant green that appeared at formal holiday tables, transforming a vegetable many children feared into something rich enough to tempt skeptics. Fresh or frozen spinach was cooked until tender, then folded into bechamel sauce enriched with cream and nutmeg. The result was silky and indulgent, spinach's slight bitterness mellowed by dairy richness. Served in small portions from silver bowls, creamed spinach added sophistication to tables that might otherwise feel rustic. Some versions incorporated cream cheese for body, while others kept the sauce light to let spinach shine. The dish required careful preparation. Overcooking turned spinach army green, but rewards justified the attention. Creamed spinach represented the era's appreciation for vegetables treated as worthy of the same care as meats and desserts, elevated beyond nutrition. Spiced nuts were the Christmas snack that filled bowls at every holiday gathering. Whole nuts roasted with butter, sugar, and warm spices until irresistibly crunchy and aromatic. Pecans and walnuts were favorites, though almonds and mixed nuts appeared too. The coating was simple: egg white whisked with sugar, cinnamon, and salt. But technique mattered greatly. Nuts had to be spread in single layers and roasted slowly, stirred frequently while the coating set into a crisp shell that shattered between teeth. The finished nuts were addictive, each handful disappearing faster than cooks could refill the bowl. Families made large batches each December, packaging some in cellophane bags tied with ribbons for teacher gifts and neighbor offerings. The aroma of roasting spiced nuts filled homes with the smell of the season, announcing that Christmas preparations were officially underway and the holidays had arrived. Molasses cake emerged from ovens on Christmas morning in homes where refined sugar was too expensive, the dark sweetener providing depth of flavor that white sugar couldn't match. Flour, molasses, eggs, and spices were beaten together and baked until the cake rose and set, its surface dark and fragrant with the smell of ginger and warm spices. The flavor was complex, sweet but with bitter undertones, spicy from ginger and cinnamon that enhanced the molasses rather than competing with it. The cake was served plain or with a simple glaze, its dense texture satisfying in ways that lighter cakes couldn't be. Molasses was affordable because it was a byproduct of sugar refining, making it the sweetener poor families relied on throughout the year. The cake could be baked ahead and stored, improving with age as the flavors melded together. Molasses cake represented making virtue of necessity, discovering that cheaper ingredients could produce results as satisfying as expensive ones. Waldorf salad was the crisp, creamy combination that brought elegance to Christmas tables, its apples, celery, and walnuts dressed in mayonnaise and served on lettuce cups. Created at New York's Waldorf Astoria Hotel, the salad spread to home kitchens where it became synonymous with refined holiday dining. The apples were diced small, their tartness balanced by creamy mayonnaise and crunchy walnuts. Some cooks added grapes or raisins for extra sweetness, while others kept it simple. The salad was served on beds of iceberg lettuce, its pale colors looking sophisticated against the green. Making Waldorf salad required careful timing. The apples would brown if prepared too early, so it was often made just before serving. The dish represented the era's fascination with hotel cuisine, when recreating restaurant dishes at home was a mark of sophistication. Waldorf salad has largely vanished from Christmas tables, replaced by green salads that seem lighter and more modern. Standing rib roast carved tableside was the Christmas centerpiece that required confidence and created genuine ceremony. The massive roast, several ribs thick and richly marbled, was seasoned simply with salt, pepper, and perhaps garlic before slow roasting in low ovens. The exterior developed a deep brown crust, while the interior stayed perfectly pink and juicy, the fat rendering and basting the meat throughout cooking. When brought to the table whole, the roast was impressive in size and aroma, filling the dining room with beefy richness. The father or grandfather would carve ceremonially, slicing thick pieces that revealed the rosy interior and fell apart with tenderness. Each guest received slices with crispy exterior fat and tender meat together. In prosperous post-war American homes, standing rib roast represented abundance and celebration, something families saved for Christmas when they wanted to show both hospitality and success. The bones were saved for soup, ensuring nothing was wasted. Modern preference for smaller cuts misses the drama and the communal satisfaction of presenting and carving this magnificent roast before gathered family. Turkey almondine casserole was Betty Crocker's answer to the week after Christmas, when leftover turkey filled refrigerators and families wanted something warm and new. She mixed turkey with a creamy sauce, vegetables, rice, or noodles, and topped it with toasted almonds for crunch. The casserole baked into a comforting dish that stretched leftovers into another complete meal, making the holiday season feel abundant even after the main feast was gone. It represented a style of cooking where nothing was wasted and every ingredient could be transformed into something special. Over time, casseroles changed, but turkey almondine remains part of Betty Crocker's approach to thrifty holiday cooking. It reminded families that creativity mattered just as much as cost, and that even simple dishes could feel luxurious with one thoughtful topping. The warm aroma drifting from the oven made homes feel full again even after the big day had passed. Molasses taffy pull was Christmas entertainment and dessert combined into one sticky, sweet tradition. Molasses was boiled with sugar until it reached hard ball stage, then poured onto buttered platters to cool slightly. Families gathered with buttered hands, pulling the taffy until it turned from dark brown to golden and became firm. The pulling was a social event, children and adults working together, laughing as the candy stretched and folded. The finished taffy was cut into pieces and wrapped, becoming Christmas treats that lasted through winter. In rural communities, taffy pull meant Christmas fun that cost almost nothing but created memories lasting lifetimes. The candy was chewy and intensely sweet, its molasses flavor marking it as mountain treat. This represented Christmas joy created through community effort, proving best celebrations came from working and laughing together, transforming simple ingredients into sweetness through shared labor and tradition. Spiced crab apples were the garnish that elevated holiday platters from ordinary to elegant, their deep ruby color and clove-studded skins announcing celebration. Whole crab apples were simmered in sweetened vinegar syrup infused with cinnamon sticks, cloves, and allspice until they turned translucent and tender. The fruits were packed into jars with their spiced liquid and stored for weeks, improving as flavors concentrated. Come Christmas, they were arranged around roasts and hams like edible jewels, their glossy skins catching candlelight beautifully. The taste was intensely sweet-tart, with warming spice notes that complemented rich meats. Some families made their own from backyard trees, while others relied on store-bought versions. Children often avoided them, but adults treasured spiced crab apples as essential holiday tradition. The jars themselves became gifts, wrapped in ribbon for neighbors. Spiced crab apples represented the artistry of preservation, autumn's harvest transformed into winter's ornament. Divinity candy was Christmas magic made visible, those snow-white puffs of sweetness appearing on holiday platters alongside fudge and pralines. Making divinity required perfect conditions, low humidity, patience, and ability to judge exactly when hot sugar syrup reached the right temperature. Cooks would boil sugar, corn syrup, and water while beating egg whites until stiff, then slowly pour screaming hot syrup into the whites while continuing to beat. The mixture transformed gradually, going from glossy and thin to thick and matte, finally holding shape when dropped from a spoon. Pecans or walnuts studded each piece, adding crunch to the melt-in-your-mouth texture. On humid days, divinity refused to set, causing heartbreak for cooks who had invested an hour of arm-aching work. When it succeeded, divinity was ethereal, sweet, light, and impossibly tender. Church ladies brought platters to Christmas bazaars. Grandmothers made batches for grandchildren who watched in wonder as the candy came together through patience. Oxtail stew simmered for hours on Christmas Eve, transforming the cheapest cuts from the butcher into rich, gelatinous luxury that rivaled any expensive roast. Butchers practically gave away oxtails, considering them scraps fit only for those who couldn't afford better. But patient cooks knew the secret. Those bony sections contained collagen that melted into silky richness when braised low and slow. The tails were browned in batches, then returned to heavy pots with onions, carrots, turnips, and whatever root vegetables the cellar still held. Hours of gentle simmering transformed tough meat into fork-tender strands, surrounded by gravy thick enough to coat a spoon. The marrow melted into the liquid, adding depth that no other cut could provide. Families gathered around steaming bowls, using bread to capture every drop. Oxtail stew represented the wisdom of slow cooking, the understanding that time and heat could elevate even the humblest ingredients. Seafood. Newburg was the luxurious first course that opened Christmas dinner with creamy richness and delicate shellfish. Lobster, shrimp, and sometimes crab meat were gently folded into a sauce of butter, cream, egg yolks, and sherry, the mixture served over toast points or in patty shells. The sauce was velvety and rich, coating each piece of seafood in decadent luxury that justified its holiday placement. Making Newburg required careful technique. The egg yolks could curdle if the sauce got too hot, ruining everything. Families served this as a first course before the main roast, a statement of abundance and sophistication. The dish came from Delmonico's restaurant in New York, spreading to home kitchens where ambitious cooks recreated its elegance. Seafood Newburg represented the era's formal dining culture, when Christmas dinner was multiple courses served with ceremony. It has largely vanished, replaced by simpler appetizers that don't require last-minute sauce making. Fruitcake soaked in brandy for months was the Christmas tradition that divided families but represented serious baking dedication. Dried fruits were soaked in brandy overnight before being mixed with flour, eggs, butter, molasses, and elaborate spice blends. The batter was packed into pans lined with parchment and baked slowly at low temperature until dark and fragrant. Once cooled, the cakes were wrapped in brandy-soaked cheesecloth and stored in tins, with more brandy added weekly. By Christmas, they were moist, boozy, and incredibly dense, tasting of concentrated fruit and spice with serious alcohol undertones. In proper households, fruitcakes were made in November or even October, the aging process considered essential to achieving proper flavor and texture. They were sliced thin and served with tea or after dinner, meant to be savored slowly rather than devoured. Today's mass-produced versions cannot match the depth or the ritual of homemade fruitcake aged properly with quality ingredients and genuine patience. Caramel corn clusters were the gift of laughter wrapped in paper bags. Each batch started with freshly popped corn and a pot of bubbling caramel that coated every piece in golden sweetness. Families made them in large tins, stirring until their arms ached and the kitchen smelled like a dream. Once cooled, the caramel corn was pressed into clusters and tied with string to be given as gifts or shared after church. The sound of kernels crackling and the sight of sticky fingers were part of the ritual. It was cheap to make, easy to share, and impossible to forget. Caramel corn clusters turned ordinary popcorn into something festive and full of love. Each bite was crisp, buttery, and comforting, like joy you could taste. They have mostly disappeared now, replaced by boxed sweets and factory-made gifts. But back then, they were worth more than anything money could buy. Christmas cranberry chutney mold was one of the spiced gelatin dishes Betty Crocker pushed in her mid-century holiday menus, presenting cranberries not just as sauce, but as a shaped, glistening centerpiece. Cranberries' sugar spices, and sometimes citrus were simmered down, then mixed with gelatin, and poured into decorative molds that created scalloped or fluted designs once chilled. When unmolded, the chutney held its shape beautifully glowing red like a gem under dining room lights. Its tangy spiced flavor paired well with turkey ham and stuffing, offering a bright contrast to heavier dishes. The mold symbolized the era when gelatin creations were considered glamorous and the height of holiday presentation. It embraced the idea that even condiments could be elevated into showpieces with the right mold and a little creativity. Though chutney molds rarely appear, now they remain a hallmark of Betty Crocker's vintage Christmas style. Dried corn pudding was Christmas side that transformed summer's abundance into winter celebration. Field corn was dried on the cob in late summer, then cut off and stored in jars. Come Christmas, the dried corn was ground coarsely and simmered in milk with butter, sugar, and eggs until it became thick custard. The result was sweet and creamy with toothsome texture from corn pieces. In rural communities, dried corn pudding represented foresight, preserving August plenty for December scarcity. The pudding was comfort food that tasted like summer sunshine captured and held through winter darkness. Served warm, it accompanied ham or turkey perfectly, its sweetness balancing savory main dishes. This proved mountain cooks understood food preservation and flavor balance, creating dishes that honored both seasons and made winter celebrations possible through summer work and planning passed through generations. Molded Waldorf salad was the elegant combination of apples, celery, walnuts, and mayonnaise suspended in shimmering gelatin that graced formal holiday tables. Classic Waldorf ingredients were folded into partially set lemon gelatin, poured into decorative molds, and chilled until firm. Unmolded onto lettuce, the salad held its shape beautifully while delivering familiar flavors in each quivering slice. The gelatin added visual appeal the original creamy version lacked, transforming simple fruit salad into something worthy of special occasions. Some versions added marshmallows for sweetness, while others kept the base true to origins. The dish could be made a day ahead, freeing time on busy Christmas morning. Molded Waldorf salad represented the era's fascination with gelatin as an ingredient that could elevate ordinary foods, turning the everyday into extraordinary. Ribbon candy was the Christmas confection that looked like frozen rainbows, thin sheets of pulled sugar folded into accordion pleats and colored in stripes of red, green, white, and gold. Making it required candy thermometers, marble slabs, and the courage to work with molten sugar hot enough to cause serious burns. Professional candy makers pulled and stretched the sugar while it was still pliable, adding colors and folding the sheets before the mixture hardened. The finished ribbons were impossibly delicate, shattering if handled roughly, and dissolving on the tongue into pure sweetness. Families displayed ribbon candy in crystal dishes, where it caught light and sparkled like decorations. Children were warned to look but not touch until Christmas Day, when the candy bowl became fair game. Each piece was unique, the folds and colors varying based on the candy maker's skill. Ribbon candy was pure celebration, too fragile and impractical for anything except special occasions when beauty mattered as much as taste. Beans and cornbread made Christmas dinner in homes where meat was unthinkable luxury, the combination providing complete protein that kept bodies strong through winter's coldest days. Dried beans, pintos, Great Northerns, or whatever variety was cheapest, soaked overnight before simmering all day with onion and salt. The cornbread baked in cast iron, its bottom crust crackling and golden from the preheated skillet. Together, beans and cornbread created a meal that was both filling and nutritious, the amino acids from each combining to provide what neither could alone. Families ladled beans into bowls and crumbled cornbread on top, the bread soaking up the bean liquor until it became almost like dumplings. The meal cost pennies but delivered satisfaction that expensive dishes couldn't match. Beans and cornbread represented survival, the understanding that celebration didn't require wealth, only the wisdom to use humble ingredients well. Plum pudding with hard sauce was the English tradition that concluded Christmas dinner with theatrical flames and boozy richness. The pudding itself was made weeks in advance, a dense mixture of sweet, dried fruits, spices, and breadcrumbs that aged until the flavors melded into something complex and deeply satisfying. On Christmas Day, the pudding was steamed for hours, then turned onto a platter and doused with brandy that was set alight, the blue flames dancing across its dark surface while guests applauded. Hard sauce, butter creamed with powdered sugar and more brandy, melted over hot slices, adding richness to every bite. Finding the hidden coin or charm baked inside brought luck to the finder. Families with English roots maintained this tradition for generations, the pudding recipe handed down carefully. The labor required and changing tastes that favored lighter desserts eventually ended the tradition for most families. Plum pudding represented a Christmas that demanded effort and rewarded patience. Stollen bread stuffed with marzipan was the German Christmas tradition that required days of preparation and delivered rich reward. The yeast dough was enriched with butter, eggs, and milk, then loaded with dried fruits, nuts, and citrus peel that had been soaking in rum. A log of marzipan was placed in the center before the dough was shaped and allowed to rise slowly. After baking until golden, the loaves were brushed with melted butter and buried in powdered sugar while still warm. The bread was dense and rich, the marzipan creating sweet almond center surrounded by fruity, yeasty bread. In German households, Stollen was made weeks before Christmas and wrapped tightly, improving with age as flavors melded. Sliced thin and served with coffee or tea, it represented celebration and tradition passed through generations. The preparation required skill and patience, making Stollen about dedication as much as deliciousness. Modern bakery versions cannot match the depth of homemade Stollen made with care and proper aging. Turkey-stuffed celery boats were the retro cold appetizer from Betty Crocker's 60s and 70s. Christmas hostess sections combining leftover turkey with mayonnaise seasonings and sometimes chopped vegetables. The mixture was spooned into crisp celery sticks, creating a refreshing, crunchy bite that balanced richer dishes. These celery boats appeared on party trays at a time when presentation favored neat, tidy finger foods that guests could enjoy while mingling. Though rarely seen now, they represent a chapter of holiday entertaining built around thrift, creativity, and charm. Angel pie with lemon filling was the delicate meringue-crusted dessert that once dazzled mid-century Christmas tables with its airy texture and bright flavor. The crust was made from whipped egg whites and sugar baked until crisp, then filled with silky lemon cream and chilled. Its snowy appearance and light citrus taste made it a perfect winter dessert, especially for hostesses who wanted something elegant. Over time, it faded from popularity, but vintage Betty Crocker books preserve this ethereal pie as one of the gentlest, sweetest holiday treats of its era. Dried apple stack pie was Christmas dessert requiring year-round work and patient assembly. Unlike stack cake with filling between layers, this pie layered thin pastry with reconstituted dried apples, building height through repetition. Each layer was seasoned with cinnamon and sugar before the next went on. Baked slowly, the pie emerged golden with visible apple layers throughout. In Appalachian communities, dried apple stack pie represented Christmas tradition connecting summer work to winter celebration. The apples had to be dried in August, stored properly through fall, then carefully rehydrated for Christmas baking. The result was concentrated apple flavor in every bite, proof that patience created the best results. This was mountain Christmas at its finest, taking what summer provided, preserving it through fall, and transforming it into winter celebration that tasted like all three seasons, combined into one magnificent pie feeding dozens and creating memories lasting lifetimes. Tomato aspic was the elegant mold that separated sophisticated hostesses from casual cooks, its shimmering clarity announcing refinement on any holiday table. Tomato juice was combined with unflavored gelatin, lemon juice, Worcestershire sauce, and careful seasoning, then poured into decorative molds to set. The result was a quivering ruby ring that held its shape when unmolded onto beds of crisp lettuce. Some versions included chopped celery, olives, or shrimp suspended within like jewels in amber. The taste was intensely savory, nothing like sweet fruit gelatins that dominated other parts of the meal. Aspic required confidence, as unmolding could go wrong if the gelatin hadn't set properly. Successful unmolding brought genuine pride, the mold releasing perfectly onto its serving platter with a satisfying wobble. Tomato aspic represented formal entertaining from an earlier era, when certain dishes signaled social knowledge. Its disappearance marked changing tastes that favor simplicity over structured elegance. Syllabub was the frothy Christmas drink that preceded modern eggnog, a mixture of cream, wine, and sugar whipped until light and airy enough to float on top of glasses. The tradition came from England, where syllabub had been served at celebrations since Elizabethan times. American cooks adapted it using whatever wine or spirits were available: sherry, Madeira, or hard cider. The cream was whipped with sugar and lemon juice until it formed soft peaks. Then the wine was folded in gently to avoid deflating the mixture. Some versions were thin enough to drink, while others were thick enough to eat with spoons. Syllabub was served in special glasses that showed off the layers, frothy cream floating above the wine below. Guests would sip the wine first, then spoon up the cream. The drink was delicate and celebratory, meant for Christmas parties where elegance mattered. Few modern cooks know syllabub, though it once graced every proper holiday table. Potato soup with dumplings became Christmas dinner when the cellar held nothing but potatoes and flour. The humble ingredients transformed through cooking into something that felt like celebration. Potatoes were diced and simmered in water with onions and whatever seasonings the pantry held until they softened and began breaking down into the liquid. Meanwhile, dumplings were mixed from flour, salt, and water or milk, then dropped by spoonfuls into the simmering soup where they puffed and cooked through. The finished dish was thick and hearty, each bowl containing potato chunks, fluffy dumplings, and rich broth thickened by potato starch. A bit of butter or bacon fat added richness when available, transforming plain vegetables into comfort. Potato soup with dumplings represented the determination to make Christmas dinner from whatever was on hand, refusing to let poverty steal the holiday spirit from families who deserved celebration. Chestnut stuffing was the old-fashioned filling that connected American Christmas to European traditions, its sweet nuttiness complementing roast poultry perfectly. Fresh chestnuts were scored, roasted until the shells split, then peeled. A labor-intensive process that took hours but yielded incomparable flavor. The peeled chestnuts were crumbled and mixed with bread cubes, sausage, onions, and herbs, the mixture moistened with stock. The texture was substantial, the chestnuts adding richness that dried bread alone couldn't provide. Families with European heritage maintained this tradition, passing down techniques for the temperamental nuts. Fresh chestnuts were available only seasonally, sold by street vendors who knew their customers waited all year. This stuffing has nearly disappeared, replaced by packaged versions that can't match the original. The labor required, and the disappearance of fresh chestnut vendors, ended a tradition that once defined Christmas flavor. Poinsettia Punch was the bright red cranberry-based drink mixed into glass bowls for Christmas parties in mid-century Betty Crocker, entertaining guides. The punch blended cranberry juice, citrus, and ginger ale, poured over ice rings frozen with cherries or mint leaves to look festive. It added sparkle color and sweetness to gatherings and was considered essential for hosts who wanted a cheerful drink that appealed to both children and adults. The punch bowl became a centerpiece, and guests gathered around dipping ladles into the shimmering red liquid. It was more than a drink, it was an atmosphere setter. It set the tone for an evening where laughter felt lighter and conversations flowed easily, reminding everyone that holiday cheer could begin with the simplest shared sip. Fried squirrel with milk gravy turned small game into Christmas celebration, tasting like hickory nuts and mountain tradition. December, squirrels were fat from fall acorns, their meat firm and flavorful. Young boys went hunting Christmas Eve morning, fathers teaching them to shoot cleanly. The squirrels were cleaned, cut into pieces, then soaked overnight in salt water. On Christmas morning, they were dredged in seasoned flour and fried in hot lard until golden crispy. Pan drippings became milk gravy, flour stirred into hot fat, then milk added slowly until thickened creamy. Families served this over fresh-baked biscuits. In Appalachian communities, Squirrel Christmas meant teaching children to hunt, to provide. Understanding food came from work. The meat was tender and slightly nutty, each piece representing hours in cold December woods. Mothers fried batch after batch, keeping platters warm. This wasn't poverty food, but tradition connecting tables to land itself. Pot liquor and cornbread dumplings turned the cooking liquid from greens into Christmas soup that wasted nothing and nourished everyone. After collards or turnip greens simmered with pork for hours, the resulting pot liquor was rich with vitamins, minerals, and smoky pork flavor. Rather than discarding this precious liquid, cooks dropped cornmeal dumplings into the simmering broth, where they puffed and absorbed the flavorful liquor. The dumplings were served in bowls with pot liquor ladled over, creating a complete meal from what might otherwise have been thrown away. Families understood that the liquid held as much nutrition as the greens themselves, making pot liquor too valuable to waste. Children slurped the broth and ate dumplings while adults appreciated the economy of the dish. Pot liquor and dumplings represented the waste-nothing philosophy that kept poor families fed. Every drop of cooking liquid honored and used. Baked Alaska was the show-stopping dessert that proved a cook's mastery, its dome of meringue concealing ice cream that somehow survived a hot oven. The construction was engineering. Sponge cake base, firmly frozen ice cream shaped into a dome, then completely covered in meringue that was quickly browned in an extremely hot oven. The meringue insulated the ice cream, allowing the outside to turn golden while the inside stayed frozen. Slicing revealed the dramatic layers: brown meringue, white ice cream, golden cake. The presentation caused gasps around Christmas tables. Making Baked Alaska required precise timing and temperature control, with no room for error. Families reserved it for the most special occasions, when impressing guests was paramount. The dessert represented the era's love of dramatic presentations and technical challenges. Baked Alaska has largely vanished from home kitchens, surviving in occasional restaurant appearances where few remember its former holiday glory. Butter beans with ham hocks brought Southern comfort to Christmas tables, their creamy texture and smoky depth satisfying appetites like few vegetables could. Dried lima beans were soaked overnight, then simmered for hours with a meaty ham hock until both beans and meat surrendered to tenderness. The cooking liquid reduced into a rich pot liquor that coated every bean with silky, porky goodness. Some cooks added onion, bay leaves, or a pinch of sugar to balance flavors, though purists let the ham and beans speak for themselves. The dish required time more than skill. Long, slow cooking was the only secret. Served in deep bowls with cornbread for soaking up the liquor, butter beans with ham hocks could anchor a meal or accompany the main roast. Grandmothers in the South passed down their timing instincts, knowing exactly when beans reached that perfect creamy yet whole texture. The dish connected Christmas to everyday survival cooking, reminding families that humble ingredients prepared with care could grace any occasion. Rice pudding appeared on Christmas dessert tables when eggs and milk were available, but expensive ingredients like chocolate and nuts were not. The creamy custard studded with raisins, satisfying sweet cravings simply. Leftover rice was baked with milk, eggs, sugar, and vanilla until it set into a creamy pudding that could be served warm or cold. Raisins added sweetness and texture, plumping in the custard as it baked until they burst with concentrated flavor. Some families added cinnamon or nutmeg, others kept the flavor pure and simple. The pudding was economical, using rice that might otherwise have been discarded and eggs from backyard chickens that cost nothing but feed. Children loved its gentle sweetness, and adults appreciated how it stretched limited ingredients into a dessert that looked and tasted intentional rather than improvised. Rice pudding represented thrift dressed as tradition, the transformation of leftovers into something worth serving on Christmas Day. Coconut snowball cake was Christmas elegance covered in white. It started as a simple butter cake, layered with cream and blanketed in shredded coconut until it resembled a perfect snowball centerpiece. Housewives displayed it proudly at the center of their tables, the coconut glistening under holiday lights like fresh powder. Each slice was soft, sweet, and cool, the kind of dessert that seemed to melt with every bite. It symbolized purity and celebration, a taste of winter magic in kitchens far from snow. Coconut was an exotic ingredient once, arriving in tins that promised tropical luxury. Mixing it into a holiday cake felt like touching two worlds at once. Even today, its old-fashioned glamour has a pull. You can almost hear the laughter of dinner guests and the scrape of a silver knife cutting through frosting when you picture it. Sweet and sour red cabbage brought German heritage to American Christmas tables, its purple-red color adding drama to plates dominated by browns. Shredded cabbage was braised slowly with apples, onions, vinegar, sugar, and warming spices until tender and deeply flavored. The long cooking allowed sweet-sour balance to develop fully. Cloves and bay leaves added complexity, while apple pieces contributed natural sweetness. This dish was traditionally served alongside roast goose or pork, its acidity cutting through rich meats perfectly. The cabbage could be made days ahead and reheated, improving as flavors melded. Children often surprised themselves by enjoying it, the sweetness making the unfamiliar vegetable approachable. Sweet and sour red cabbage represented immigrant traditions that enriched American holiday tables, proving the best dishes traveled across oceans. Water, gravy, and biscuits became Christmas breakfast when there was nothing else in the pantry. The gravy made from flour, fat, and water stretched to cover biscuits that were the only food remaining. Bacon drippings or lard was heated in a cast-iron skillet, flour stirred in until golden, then water added gradually until the mixture thickened into gravy. Salt and pepper were the only seasonings, and the gravy was ladled over biscuits that had been split open to catch every drop. The meal was filling if not festive, and families ate it knowing that even water gravy meant they had something for breakfast on Christmas morning. The dish represented the absolute bottom of poverty cooking, the meal when every other resource was exhausted. Yet even water gravy was served on the best plates at Christmas, because dignity mattered even when the budget didn't allow for more. Water gravy and biscuits proved that love could make any meal feel like celebration. Salt-cured country ham was Christmas luxury taking months to create and symbolizing prosperity through patience. These weren't store hams, but whole hog legs cured in salt, then hung in smokehouses through fall and winter. The curing began in November, with fresh hams rubbed with salt and sometimes sugar, drawing out moisture and preserving meat without refrigeration. By Christmas, hams developed deep mahogany exteriors and concentrated salty sweet flavor, unlike anything modern. The ham was soaked overnight to remove excess salt, then baked slowly with brown sugar glaze, creating caramelized crust. Sliced thin, the meat was intensely flavorful, salty, smoky, rich, requiring only biscuits and red-eye gravy. In Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee, country ham represented wealth and foresight, since families began curing in fall for Christmas. The smell of ham baking filled houses Christmas morning. This wasn't bought but made food, requiring knowledge of salt ratios and smoking. Backbone stew with root vegetables was Christmas dinner that used December butchering and fall harvest together. The pork backbones were meaty but inexpensive, perfect for slow-cooked stews. Combined with stored potatoes, turnips, carrots, and onions, they created rich, hearty meal. Simmered for hours, the bones released flavor and gelatin, while vegetables softened into the broth. In mountain communities, backbone stew represented Christmas economy, using cuts others overlooked and vegetables stored from harvest. The stew was thick and satisfying, its broth rich with pork flavor. Served with cornbread, it fed large families affordably while still feeling celebratory. The meat fell off bones easily. The vegetables were tender and sweet. This was Christmas dinner that proved celebration didn't require expensive cuts when you had time, patience, and knowledge of how slow cooking transformed humble ingredients into something genuinely delicious and nourishing. Bread stuffing balls were individual portions of holiday stuffing shaped and baked until crispy outside and tender within, eliminating serving challenges of casserole-style dressing. The stuffing mixture, cubed bread, celery, onions, sage, and broth, was formed into golf ball-sized spheres and arranged on baking sheets. A brush of melted butter before baking ensured golden, crispy exteriors, while interiors stayed moist. Each guest received their own perfect portion. No fighting over corner pieces or soggy centers. Children especially loved the novelty of stuffing they could pick up, and adults appreciated increased ratio of crispy surface to soft interior. Some cooks added sausage or chestnuts, creating richer balls. The individual portions made serving easier, no digging through casserole dishes while juggling plates. Bread stuffing balls represented creative problem-solving in holiday kitchens, taking a traditional dish and reimagining its presentation for practical and delicious results. Fried pies appeared on Christmas tables as portable desserts that stretched fruit preserves into something special. The half-moon pastries filled with whatever jam or dried fruit the pantry held. Pie dough was rolled thin and cut into circles, spoonfuls of filling placed on one side before the dough was folded, and edges crimped tight with fork tines to seal in the sweetness. The pies were fried in hot fat until golden and crispy, the filling bubbling inside while the crust shattered with each bite. Apple, peach, and berry were common fillings, made from fruit preserved during summer harvest when orchards and bushes overflowed with abundance. The pies could be eaten by hand, making them perfect for children and for taking to church gatherings where plates were scarce. Fried pies represented the genius of transforming pantry staples into festive treats, each one a small celebration wrapped in flaky pastry. The technique allowed families to serve individual desserts that looked impressive. Spiced apple snow was a dessert born from imagination and a few humble ingredients, long before electric mixers or instant puddings ever existed. It was made by beating stewed apples with sugar, spice, and whipped egg whites until it transformed into something light as air, a pale, cloud-like confection with a cinnamon glow. In colonial kitchens, it was considered both elegant and thrifty, a sweet reward after a year of careful preservation. By the 1800s, spiced apple snow graced Christmas tables as a symbol of simplicity done beautifully. It melted on the tongue, cool and fragrant, the kind of dessert that did not overwhelm but lingered softly. Children would watch in awe as apples turned into clouds under their mother's spoons, proof that magic could happen in a bowl. It may have vanished from modern cookbooks, but its spirit remains in every whipped cream topping and apple pie filling we still hold dear. Cherry divinity, which lost recipe deserves a place on your Christmas table again? Drop your favorites in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe so you never miss another taste of the holidays we almost forgot.